What's up, Nick?
Nick.
Can I call Mom, John?
Tell Nick. Hey, tell Nick's here.
Hey.
You left for a second.
What's going on?
Who's sore from the Murph yesterday? Hi, Marcus.
How's it going?
Hey, Mark.
How's it going?
Good. Uriah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Uriah?
Uriah, yep.
I gotta find a virtual background here.
Oh, there you go. I like it. Rock
Yeah,
it.
but the light isn't good, man.
Hey, when did you get all tech savvy?
You know, I've been learning a few things here.
Suppose.
Is this live video, like, as well?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm trying to find good.
We record it too, and then for those
That
that
was dumb.
What's that?
Like, I feel like my camera is steamed up or something.
Yeah.
This is a brand new Mac.
Oh, that's better.
Is it better?
Yeah, it is.
That's what it was, wasn't it?
You
One
got
more
a
time.
fresh. Did you get a fresh Bic job on your head?
I didn't bick it. I just shaved it like normal.
Hair's overrated, right? It's just one more thing.
Hair is for looks. I'm not here to look good.
Oh,
What's going on the Crescent?
what's going on?
Yeah.
Just grinding, man. You know,
Yeah.
trying to change some things around.
Crazy times.
Oh yeah. I mean, all around crazy times, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's different. Been unique trying to manage a football program from my basement.
Yeah. Seriously.
Yeah.
How do you even go about something like that?
You
Are
just
they going to
do-
have a season?
I hope so.
Me too.
I'm worried about. Hold on. I'm worried about what's going to happen to our boys if we don't have a football season.
Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
kind of what we were doing with this program is we kind of asked ourselves the same questions. You know, when all the spring sports got shut down, we're like, structure, accountability, you know, training.
Yeah.
That's kind of a big part of why we're even doing it in the first place. Yep, absolutely. But
I don't know.
we can get going, Mark. You know, like this is kind of largely what we're going to do is just have a conversation. But let me do the formal stuff real quick and introduce everybody, because I know you're just meeting Uriah for the first time virtually, and hopefully you guys get a chance to meet in person in the future. But everyone else watching, this is a really good friend. I'm honored to call him a friend, Mark Esch, Coach Mark Esch. And I met Mark probably 7-8 years ago, and we did a business together. And I just really, I was just really attracted to Mark, not his looks, but just the type of guy he was, just as a man, as a husband, as a father, and he was a coach. So I kind of, you know, we had a lot in common that way. And just like how direct and truthful he was with everybody. And so we just, over the years, have developed a strong friendship, his family and my family. And he's done a lot of great things. And I kind of wrote in our WhatsApp group, you know, he's, in addition to being a great husband, a great father, he's been an incredible football coach. He's won a couple state titles with Mankato West. He's the new varsity head football coach for Minnetonka High School, which is a monster of a high school. So it takes an incredible man, leader, high character guy to take over a program like that. I'm excited to see what he does with it. And we're talking to an author, ladies and gentlemen. Must
Yeah.
read. This is a great read. He wrote the book Rise of the Warriors, and it's about culture, and it's about a lot of what we talk about. In fact, a lot of things that we're doing in this program is Mark, has some inspired things from his book are in our curriculum. So without further ado, everyone, welcome Mark Esch. We're honored to have you on, buddy.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
So why don't you tell everyone right now where you're residing? This is a sparkling water. Okay, I haven't gotten soft. It's not orange soda.
Googly. My wife drinks that, Brandon.
That's
You're not above a good ribbing on this broadcast, are you?
Say that again.
Not above a good ribbing on this broadcast, are you?
No, absolutely
No,
not. Bring it on. We're all for it. I'm gonna turn my fan on.
So, what are you getting? Just where I reside now, we currently live in southern metro, Savage area, Savage, Minnesota, suburb. We're looking to relocate over towards Minnetonka, of course, with the new job. Really excited about that. And yeah, that's where we're at right now. Got a for sale sign in our house. So if anybody wants to buy a house, give me a call.
Savage, great area. Yeah, it is. Nice
It
lake
is.
up there.
It is.
Yeah, for sure.
So I know you kind of cover some of this stuff in the book, but where we tend to like to begin is just is in the beginning of Mark's childhood. Like, kind of explain what it was like growing up in the Esch household, in the community that you grew up in, and kind of like those, birth to 12 years old type of, and then we'll kind of go on from there.
Sounds good. Yeah. Growing up in the Esch household, I had one older brother. He was 4.5 years older than me. Mom and dad. Dad worked hard. He drove truck, worked in concrete. And mom mostly stayed at home. So always had a mom at home. Two things that I say I always knew about my family. I knew they loved me, even though we didn't say it very often. We were very, I wouldn't say not emotional, but we weren't dramatic. Let's just say that, if you can believe that. And I knew they loved me, and I knew they believed in me. And in all the things I ever remember trying to do, I remember my mom, and even specifically my dad, never doubting me. Always, hey, yeah, you can do that. You can do that. And so that's the environment I grew up in. And, Brownsville, I want to get a t-shirt that says straight out of Brownsville. It's a town of 400 people. We bus to Caledonia every day, 25 minute bus ride. And it wasn't South Central Los Angeles, but it wasn't, there was some violent, you got in fights, you played football games, and people got mad, and you got into brawls, and certainly the tough kids were the cool kids growing up. And, I allude to that in my book, but when I left.
So you weren't one of the cool kids, is what you're saying.
I probably wasn't for a long, long time. When I left Brownsville, I kind of had that toughness with me. I like to think I still carry it today. Our next broadcast, me and Brandon will get on a wrestling mat. But that's kind of the upbringing in a nutshell, without getting into a lot of details. And it was a great childhood. I mean, I think back to my childhood. I had a lot of fun. I got obsessed with football when I was about 3 years old. I remember my brother and my dad watching a football game in 1980 when I was 3 years old. Amar Rashad had a one-handed catch to win the game against Cleveland Browns, and they freaked out. I remember that as a 3-year-old. It's so weird. And I guess I became a huge football fan ever since. I remember getting excited to watch the Vikings every Sunday.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That's crazy how you remember that vividly at 3 years old.
Yeah, right. That's crazy.
I still have a picture of my dad jumping up and down.
Yeah.
So after that point, obviously, in high school, were you more of a, did you play more than football? Did you play multiple sports?
Yeah, great question. So I was a football, basketball, baseball guy, going into the school, which Caledonia is a 7-12 school.
Yep.
And did basketball and baseball through probably 8th grade. This is a story that's not in the book. Carl Frichte, who's the head football coach and really the main character in the book, he was my 8th grade basketball coach. And I told him I wasn't going to go out for basketball. In fact, there was a meeting, and I sat in the lunchroom. All my friends went up to the meeting, and he came down, and he's like, "Mark, why aren't you at the meeting?" I'm like, "Well, I'm not going out. I'm going to lift, and I'm going to get bigger and stronger and faster." He's like, "You need to come out for basketball." Because he knew because of the culture at Caledonia, and this, I refer to the book every once in a while. This is in the book. The kids who didn't do a sport usually never went to the weight room. They said they were gonna, but they never did. And then they got caught up in drinking and smoking and all that stuff. So he looked at me as like, okay, this kid's not going to play basketball. I'm going to go down and get him. Well, he didn't get me, but I did what I said I was going to do. I stayed clean. I became a weight room guy in 8th grade, hardcore, and really have never looked back since then. But yeah, and then I converted to track in 10th grade. So
Okay.
Ran track and played football.
Gotcha. Yeah, we in this especially, and then at the weight room too, working with kids, we preach the multi-sport athlete. We're trying to get kids to go out for football, whatever it is in the winter, be it hockey, wrestling, basketball, baseball, and track. But we try to hammer that home. We think it makes you not only a more rounded athlete, but a more rounded person as well.
I agree 100%. After, coaching football for 20 years, I'm a firm believer in multiple sport athletes. And I wish I would have played basketball. I actually wish I would have wrestled. But back then, wrestling was go lose 20 pounds and spit in the water fountain. And, really, it's not what I hope it is today. And it's at least not what I see.
Right. Yep.
Gotten way better in that category. I wish I would have wrestled. And I firmly believe, for any young kids listening, parents listening, I would have been a better football player if I'd have played more sports for a longer period of time, because you can't, the stress that happens in a sport, the stress of being on a wrestling mat by yourself, one-on-one with another human being, you can't reproduce that in a weight room. I'm sorry, you can't.
Right.
And it makes you a better, more rounded person, like you were saying.
That's awesome.
So take us through your high school years.
Yeah, that's kind of where the book starts. I was one of about 3 or 4 kids in my class. I graduated from Caledonia in 1995. I was one of about 3 or 4 kids that didn't drink or smoke, or do that stuff. And there were some kids that did just a little bit, but like we were hardcore. We were like, we're going to train, we're going to lift, we're going to sprint, we're going to get better. We want to play football. We want to run track. And so we were the outcasts. We were the sportos, whatever. I remember sitting in a class my junior year with 2 kids that were about 3 rows over from me that would just literally ride me the entire time and just make fun of me and rip on me. I don't know if the teacher didn't hear it. I don't know. I don't really care anymore because I feel like it made me a stronger person. It sucked at the time, but we were the minority, and it was hard. It was hard. And there was certainly some violence, and, I didn't get in a lot of like street brawls, so to speak, but, you'd exchange words, somebody get punched in the face, and then it would be over and nobody would get in trouble. It was all those types of things. So it was tough. I mean, I stood for something that I wanted to do. I do regret, and I'm gonna just be frank with this. When I was done with my senior year of football, and this, guys, is one reason why, we were talking before, if we don't have football this fall, I'm really concerned. As soon as my senior year of football was done, I fell off the bus, and then I became, the sporto that was now a drinker. And I regret that looking back. But same time, I tell that story because, it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth caving in on my beliefs for a short period of time just to try to become cool. I wish I would have stuck to my guns and finished strong. So I have a pregame speech, or a pre-practice speech, actually it is, about finishing strong, and I kind of tell some stories like that. So it was a tough deal. There wasn't a lot of support. Carl Frichte and Mark Frailing were very supportive, but from your peers, it wasn't a very supportive environment.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. Associations are everything. So kudos to you for staying strong during those years, because those are some really impressionable years where, man, people's social currency, is really what their friends think of them.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes some thick skin, to hold true to what you set out to do,
Yep. So, I've been wanting to ask this question. So talk a little bit about what it was like to play for a guy like Carl Frichte.
I tell stories about Carl all the time. So first of all, he's very intense. Like, you wouldn't believe he's intense. Like, he's intense. I'm just stressing that.
Yeah.
It's hard to describe. All right. But at the same time, like, he cares for you at a level like it's even with your parents or even beyond. It's family. He would do anything for you. I mean, he would drive us to the Twin Cities when I was in like 9th and 10th grade and take us to speed camps. This was way before anybody ever thought about going to speed camps. U of M had speed camps. I'm sure just the city kids came. We were driving from Caledonia. A couple stories. We were playing 7-on-7 at the time. Carl would play with us. I don't know, when I was 17, he was probably late 20s, right? So still in his prime. And he was so fast, like unbelievably fast. And I remember one time we were playing 7-on-7. I catch a ball, I'm 5-yard line, I'm going in. Here comes this bolt of lightning on the 1-yard line, knocks the ball out of my hand, and then screams at me, "Don't let up till you get in the end zone." Never again did I ever let up. And to this day, I teach my kids, and I tell that story. And I'm like, you do not let up until you cross that goal line. One other quick story. In 9th grade, he was our 9th grade head coach. So he was an assistant at the time, but he was my 9th grade head coach. And in practice, I take a handoff, I hit the hole, kind of half-hearted. He's like, "Mark, I need you to run harder," as a running back. So I'm like, I give the best response. I know. Coaches hate that, right? Coaches despise that response. And he just goes off, "If you know, then you better do it." And he has this high-pitched scream, right? So if you're watching Caledonia at the Dome, I call it the Dome, it's US Bank Stadium, right? But if you're watching on these state final games, you can actually hear his high-pitched scream. Like, if you know, why don't you do it? But at the same time, he would love you up. He would do anything for you. And I think that's even grown more since he's coached. Even more, I think, as you mature as a coach, that idea of, I want to add value to somebody else's life. It matures and grows. And I see that in him. I mean, just a few months ago, one of his former players didn't feel like he fit in at a school where he's playing. Carl drives in 5 hours, gets him in a different school, drives back to the place he came from. He helps him move, like didn't sleep for 20 hours to help this kid get to a better situation. And, how many people do that? I'm not sure if I would, I'd like to think I would. But,
Right.
Well, I'll tell you what, he's been helpful for us. He's been
Mm-hmm.
a special guest here, and just, man, tell you what, you call and he responds. And like you're kind of a, I don't know, Carl Frichte protege, or, you know what I mean? Like you're part of that fabric that he's created. And, so I would say you probably would do the same thing, Mark,
I'd like to think so.
Yeah. So, and the thing about an intense coach that, I mean, I've had some intense coaches, but when you know that they care, it's when they've established trust and rapport with you, like, you know that they care about you first as an individual, they can bark at me all day long.
Right.
But if there's not that built and it's just a coach barking orders, man, you just can't get kids to respond. Would you say the same thing in your experiences?
Yeah, that's one of my key points. And, I'm talking to our current coaching staff about that. I just did a parent presentation last week where this is what we're built on: relationships and accountability. And that's just what you described, Brandon. If some coaches come in and they just want the relationship, but they're really bad at holding kids accountable, that's not a good combination. You're going to have, you're not going to be able to keep the reins on the kids. And then there's the guys that come in and just want to hold everybody accountable and yell and scream, but not have the relationship. So it's a constant balance of relationship and accountability. And you have to build the relationship first. And then you can do just what you were talking about, Brandon. You can get on the kids and they're not going to, they're not going to revolt on you. In fact, it's going to make them stronger. And I think that's something that so many leaders miss in general. And not like, football is different than sitting in an office building. If you yell at anybody in an office building, well, nobody's going to like you, right?
Yeah.
But if you have a relationship and you have a firm conversation in the office building, it goes over way better. And it's the same thing with football or coaching or anything.
Yeah, I'm glad you said leaders because, a lot of the kids that watch this, they might think, well, I'm not a coach, but you are a leader. If you can impact one person on your team, you're a leader. So if you're looking to be a leader on your sports team, that same concept applies. Is if you build relationships and rapport with your teammates, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be best friends even, but relationship and rapport. And then when you get in the heat of battle, it's okay to bark at each other when that's been built. Right.
100%. Yeah. And I think kids need to understand this as much as anybody, because you sometimes ask your captains to go talk to a player or whatnot, and it's not direct communication. It's all just mushy relationship stuff. And so as a leader, as a kid, whether you're 16, 17, whether you're 12 years old, it's the same balance. The law never changes of relationship and accountability. You have to have both.
Right. So tell us about your Mankato West days.
Yeah. So had a few different coaching stops before Mankato West. Just real quick, I coached at lacrosse at the college level, and then went to White Bear Lake for a year, went to the University of South Dakota for a year, and then I was at Austin High School, Spamtown, for 3 years. I was an offensive line coach there. And then, kind of got lucky, got a head coaching job at Mankato West. It was a divine appointment. I didn't really become a believer. My faith didn't grow. My faith in Christ didn't grow until I was 26 years old. Going back to my upbringing, I didn't really grow up. I went to church every Sunday, but I wouldn't say I had a faith.
Right.
That grew. I had a faith experience when I was 26 years old, and that changed everything. So I think it was a divine appointment. When I was 29 years old, I became the head football coach at Mankato West. And we had 11 years that were just unbelievable. And I wouldn't trade those years for anything. And I want to preface it with this. The success we had at Mankato West was due to the kids who worked their tails off and really bought into the culture we were trying to create. I can preach all day about a culture, but if you don't have the kids that are going to go out and lead and build the culture, they're the ones that are building it. I can talk to them blue in the face, but they got to go out and build the culture. And our kids did that right away in 2006, all the way through 2016. It was 11 football seasons. And those kids learned how to work their tails off. They loved each other. It was a brotherhood. And that's why we were successful. No other reason. I look back at those years, and we had a freshman coach here at Minnetonka that just left. He's been a coach for 18 years. He always felt like I just had to. He said to me, I felt like I had the title of head coach, but everybody else did everything. Like that's the way I felt at Mankato West. You look back and I'm like, I don't know. I didn't really do anything special. And at the end of the day, you contributed as a head coach, but it's just so many people were involved to create that success. Third year we win a state championship, 2 state championships in 11 years. We were in the semifinals 6 times, of 11 years. Some of those semifinal games were the toughest ones to swallow. Sometimes some of them I still have nightmares on. We didn't get back to the Prep Bowl, but what a great run. And I can expand more on those years if you want me to, Brandon. But also, I just want to make this point. When it was 2016 and it was time for me to leave, I was totally at peace with leaving. Never have I regretted for 1 second. The last 3 years at West, we were like 30-something and 3 with a state championship. And most people are like, why would you leave? Right? I'm like, God wanted me to leave, and I listened, and I took a year off, and that's led to other things. So, sometimes you just got to be obedient and, follow your heart.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So right away when you got to Mankato West, you had a good core group of kids to work with, and they bought in right away. Eh?
That's a great question. I think a lot of your opportunities in life are timing, and it might have taken longer in a different situation.
Yep.
When I got to Mankato West, there was a group coming into their sophomore year that was all about sports, super talented, and they bought in right away. Our juniors and seniors did too. It's like they were screaming for weight room. And I don't want to get into the previous staff, but it wasn't a great weight room atmosphere. Like it was turn the key, open the door, sit at the desk, and you guys go work out, right? We know how well that works.
Right.
I got asked all the time by opposing coaches, like, Coach, how do you get your kids in the weight room? How do you get your kids to buy into workouts? And this is from winter, spring, summer. I'm like, is your head coach there and is he leading the workouts? Well, there's your problem. I feel strongly like you can rely on a strength coach, and we have one at Minnetonka, and you can rely on other coaches to help, but you got to be the main voice. And I think that's the most crucial thing. So to answer your question, Uriah, in 2006, I took over that group of sophomores, won a state championship in 2008. So
Wow.
it was pretty great timing.
That is awesome. And that is, I'm gonna take that because having, like you said, your leader and that voice. I remember when I went to Minnesota State University, 2009 to 13, and we got a new coach by the name of Michael Hastings my last year, and he would show up to the weight room and he would bark. And I'll tell you what, it gets you to another level, so that's an unbelievable piece of advice. And I didn't really think of that until you said that right there, but that's great.
The head coach will always raise the level of concern in any atmosphere. If you're doing it the right way, level of concern goes up.
Yep.
So these kids, okay, so what are some of the biggest, if they were starving for the weight room, they got the weight room.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Explain kind of just the development of their body, of their physicality, of their mental hardware, just by doing the work in the weight room, just pumping the iron.
It's unbelievable. It's indescribable what you can do if you're consistent for 2 or 3 years as a high school kid. In some cases, I don't want to give anybody the green light, but even to do it for 1 year, like if you're going into your senior year, you can accomplish a lot just this summer if you're sitting on the couch and you get up and you get into action. Why? your body is, as a male, your body is full of hormones, right? You know, testosterone, all that stuff is just flowing through your body. So you can really change your body in a short period of time. So our kids came in, they worked their tails off. They got stronger. When you get stronger, your confidence level naturally increases. Your level of physicality, I feel like you're not going to go from a level 4 physicality to a level 10 on a scale 1 to 10, but you can go from a 6 to an 8 very easily just by the confidence you build in the weight room. You can go from a level 8 physicality level to a 10 just from a year in the weight room because your confidence grows so much. Then you add in the speed training, which, you know, we took Caledonia's speed model and implemented it the best we could. And, you know, we add in the speed training with the right weight room training, and it just felt like it was unstoppable what we were doing. And we were a full speed, full recovery team really from the get-go in 2006. I never saw the need to make kids puke and, you know, just bury them in the ground. We never did that. If you watch Caledonia train, you're like, these kids play both ways and never come out of the game. And so I think there's some secrets behind the training methods too, but I think your confidence just grows to a level that you could just never achieve. And then the last point is when you got a group of 40 kids in the weight room, 40 guys, you know, I'm talking about football, and they're going to go out on the football field in 3 months. They bond like no other, you know, as long as they're consistent. You can't have 25 one day, 40 the next day, and then 15 on Friday. That's not how it works. You know, you're averaging 95% attendance because kids care. And that's one way you build the brotherhood.
That's good. It's awesome. It's really good. And for all the, we do have a lot of lady athletes in here too. The same principles essentially apply to you too. You know, like the athleticism, the mental toughness, the confidence, with your body's changing and having that stimulus placed on your body in the weight room changes everything. Maybe even more so. I'm not a female, but maybe even more so, right? Compared to their peers,
I've trained a very few females, you know, just being a football coach, but I think you can look to Caledonia for this model as well. Their females train and they train hard. And, you know, to the females out there that are listening, your body doesn't change. You don't get all muscly like a dude because you don't have that testosterone and growth hormone that the guys do. It'll just naturally bring out your female figure, but you'll be more explosive, more athletic. Mm-hmm. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, and I'm going to rip on the guys here a little bit, but females are just so much more teachable.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Oh, yes.
Agree.
Yes. To this day, you know, in my household. Yeah. Goodness.
Right.
Oh, so, okay. So West, now you're at Minnetonka. What are you looking at? What's the outlook there? What are you walking into? What are you excited about? What are some things that you know you got to work on to turn that program into the tradition that it's been? I know it's been a powerhouse in the past.
Right. And, you know, just to piggyback on that before I get into the details, Coach Nelson has done an amazing job. He's a Hall of Fame football coach. And, you know, people are, how are you gonna fill his shoes? I'm like, I'm not even going to put them on, right? I'm going to do my own. I'm going to put on my own shoes, and that's how I run the fastest. I wear my own shoes, right? So, you know, to come in after him, everything's in place. You know, in Mankato, we had to fundraise for a weight room. We had to, you know, we didn't have a golf tournament. We had limited funding available, and all that stuff from a program perspective is in place. So he did a great job there. And, you know, 3 seasons ago, they were in the Prep Bowl, you know, playing Eden Prairie for a state championship. And then, you know, last year I was on staff there as an assistant. We were 0-9, which was tough. But it gave me an insight. So I tell you, Brandon, that question, the number one thing that we're going to work on when we get back consistently, that we were working on for the month, where I actually saw the kids when I was a head coach before the pandemic, is just straight up work ethic, right? We just need to learn to work hard in the weight room, on the field, and give 100% at all times. And I firmly believe that most high school kids don't fully understand how to go 100% at all times.
Mhm.
They just don't. I don't think I did. And I don't think most high school kids understand that. So let's go back to the weight room. We're going to start probably outdoor workouts here in June, where we can't go inside the weight room, but we can come outside and do a whole bunch of stuff in small groups. And the level of concern is going to be finishing. We're never going to be lazy. We're always going to finish our drills. We're always going to go 100%. And if you don't want to, you can go home. This is optional. And I firmly believe, I'm going to get on a soapbox here, guys, but
Get on it.
I'm a big World War II guy, right? I didn't fight in the war, but I'm a World War II buff. My grandfather fought in World War II, and I've studied it. And I think the one defining characteristic why America could fight a war on two fronts, really two wars with Japan and Europe, was the German soldiers and the Japanese soldiers were conscripted, meaning they were forced to fight. If they didn't fight, they would be shot. The American soldier, the majority, were volunteers, and they were forced to do nothing. And they fought. Hey, this is appropriate. We just had Memorial Day, right? They fought because they had a life that was promised to them back home of freedom. And so you can throw in the Japanese fought to the death and all that stuff, but nothing could beat the American spirit, because it was optional for these guys. And to take it on a much more minute level, I say this all the time to our guys: if you don't want to work hard, you can go home and you can go out for some other sport where maybe that's acceptable, but it's not acceptable here. So number one, guys, we're gonna focus on working hard, because I know if the kids come out in June and July and work their tails off together, that's going to form a bond. It's going to form a brotherhood. And I feel like I already have the relationships with these kids. It was an advantage being on staff last year, where I can push them, continue to develop the relationship, but hold them accountable. So that's what we're focusing on right now. That'll be our number one focus. We're talking X's and O's and all that stuff as coaches. None of that means anything. If you can get a group to go out and play 100% every snap, 11 players on the field, you're going to win more games than you lose. I guarantee it.
I asked that same question to Carl one time too, and he's like, he similar answer. He's like, we don't have a fancy system.
Right.
Our system isn't fancy at all. We just outwork everybody. Like, I love that, because it's such a level. I mean, if you're willing to do it, very few people are willing to put in the work, But if you are, man, you can play with the best.
Yeah, 100%. Guys, if every coach out there went out and built relationships with his kids or her kids, and then held them accountable in the appropriate measure, and accountability, working hard, it would change the state of Minnesota in athletics entirely. I mean, it would be amazing, the changes that would take place, and in society.
For sure. Absolutely. The next generation coming up, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you talked about kids working out in, June, July. And then you talk about like that 95% rate, hoping to get those kids. How, because I think this is one thing we're trying to work on here, is how do you get that buy-in? Do you have any tips or tricks or anything for us that we can kind of relay or try to get these kids to buy in to the weight room and to what we're trying to do down here?
Yeah, and even in the program too. Like with our virtual program here, we got a lot of kids in it. But Mark, you being a coach, that, and being a teacher, that virtual isn't ideal, and participation isn't nearly as what we want it to be. So in that context too, getting kids to just buy into even this has its own challenges.
Yep.
Well, I think it's unprecedented times because of where we're at.
Sure.
Number one, and Brandon, I'm going to shoot you straight. You can't outwork a negative culture necessarily if you're not the head coach. This goes back to what I talked about. The head coach has to be on board 100%. And then I think, okay, we've already talked about these topics. Go back to relationships. If you guys, I'm talking about you guys right now, me too. Like if a kid doesn't show up to the weight room, but I know he's on my list, and you guys might have a similar situation that's, that you can take this advice. If he doesn't show up to the weight room, what do? I call him. I might call 10 kids, and I'm building that relationship. Even if they don't answer their phone, they know you're reaching out, and that's building a relationship. So I think the relationship is always the key. Number one, then from that point on, would be the kids know why they're doing what they're doing. So encouraging kids to write down their purpose for working hard. What is your purpose for doing these online workouts? What's your purpose for coming to summer workouts? And in the book, I say it's know why you're here. And, in Caledonia, they'll say, I want to become a better, tougher man, because that's what coach wants. That's his goal. That's our program goal. I want to become a better, tougher man. And so I can learn these things. They seem so mature, learn these things and apply them to life, but know why you're here. And then number two, and this comes from coaches, it can come from you guys, it can come from head coach. Once you decide what you want to do and why you want to do it, you never, ever quitting is the key. And so it's just really those two things. And you could get into, preaching discipline and all that stuff. But if and Brandon, this, when the why is strong enough, the how takes care of itself. We heard that all the time in the business we were in. When the why is strong enough, the how takes care of itself. I have no problem waking up at 5 a.m. if I'm excited about something. But if I don't have much to do, I usually don't get up at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yep. That's awesome.
So, on these special guest segments too, we explore faith, and so you mentioned, you kind of grew up, going to church on Sundays, but I think a lot of people can relate to having done that more as a check in the box rather than a faith.
Right.
So what happened?
Yeah, great question. So I grew up Catholic, went to church every Sunday, and got, what do you call it? Confirmed when I was, in my upper teens. And then I went to college, and we're going back to the same thing here, guys. It's relationship. So here's what I want everybody who listens to this to examine for themselves. How the heck did you get here? Like, why are you living and breathing and watching this right now? Do you have any idea? Because most people will put more thought into their math homework or what car they want to buy than how they got here and why they're alive and why, what's the purpose of all this? And you really come down to two beliefs. You believe that the universe created you by some chance, or you believe that there's a divine creator. And for me, I always believed it and knew that there was a divine creator. I just never understood like how people could believe that we just got here by chance, because who invented chance? Like, where did that come from? I mean, if it's absolutely nothing, no molecules, no air, nothingness, how does something get started?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right? So that was always me. I always knew that I was created, and I always had a faith of some type. But then I learned about Jesus Christ. He died for me on the cross, and he did this so that he laid down his life like a true leader, a true servant. He laid down his life for me and for you and for everybody listening to this, so that they could have direct access to God through Jesus, and they could be cleansed of their sins, and they could be in union with God. And before, I never had that feeling of peace. I remember I was a non-believer, what I call a non-believer, and I took a trip to San Diego, which is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. It was 2003, I believe. I just always felt emptiness whenever I left a place like that. It's just like, I had a great time, and then what more is there? And then when I came to this experience, I actually was, when I moved to Vermillion, South Dakota, it's a funny story. So I'm just this dude here, and I'm at a coach's meeting, and the team pastor starts talking to our team. And after the meeting, there's hundreds of guys there. There's a bunch of coaches. He looks at me and said, "Hey, you look like you work out. You want to work out a couple days a week with me?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay." Right? So it's almost like I was handpicked. And then I'm working out with this pastor. I remember thinking, man, this guy's going to be weird, right? He's going to preach to me all the time. He never once preached to me. And you know what that did? It intrigued me enough to, I want to go check out your church. And I saw something different. And then I met my wife, and we got into talking about faith. She was a Christian. She was kind of backsliding at the time. We were living in Austin, Minnesota. And she had lost her mom. She was struggling with that. And we were getting into these faith conversations. And afterwards, she told me, she said, my mom always wanted me to marry a Christian, so I was praying for you that you would come to faith in Jesus Christ, or as Carl calls him, King Christ. I'm sure he called it on the show.
Yeah, he did.
And you know what? She moved to Cedar Rapids. I was visiting her one weekend. She was doing the news. That's what she did. She was on TV. And I was sitting on her couch reading a book about the apocalypse. Weird things, right? But it was a book about the apocalypse that led you to faith. And I remember praying a prayer of salvation right there. It changed everything for me. I was into drinking, looking at things online that I shouldn't be looking at. I was into all that stuff. And it all started to melt away. And as soon as that happened, I could just feel the spirit of calmness and peace. And it just took over my whole life. And obviously it's developed. I'm not saying I don't get anxiety. I don't worry and all that stuff. I'm not perfect. But it's just such a different deal. Like, I think that's what's happening in the world right now, guys. Like, so many people look at this virus and they think, if this hits me or my parent or somebody, it's eternal blackness. Like, there's nothing. And what does that cause? It causes fear. Mm-hmm. And when you have Christ and you have the Holy Spirit, and and I just know deep down in my soul that if this gets to me, first of all, I'm going to dominate it. Number two, if I didn't, I know where I'm going, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I don't know if I should say this, but I'm okay if if it happens to one of my family members too, that I know have faith. And I'd hate to lose a child or anything like that, but my girls are on fire for Christ, and that makes me proud.
Yeah.
So this is happening right now. So, I mean, whoever's listening to this, kids, adults, parents, you got to examine, why are you here?
Yeah. Super relevant, man.
Just books that I read early on, I think that are interesting for everybody. A Case for a Creator by Lee Strobel, and A Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. Two great books. If you don't want to read the book, go watch the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's on Netflix, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah. The book's better, I thought, but
As always.
yeah.
As always.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. Well, so tell us about, I know you kind of already have, but
Yeah.
how about, not about the book so much, but about being an author, about the process of because here's the deal. You'll probably say this, that anybody can do this, but a lot of people would look at that and go, I could never do that.
Yeah. Well, I think anybody could do it, right? And Brandon, you know me, and I'm a big Jocko guy.
Why don't you explain who Jocko is so people know Jocko?
So,
Yeah.
Jocko Willink, yeah.
Everybody.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's just
So if you're listening to this and you have not listened to Jocko podcast, go to your iTunes or whatever podcast thing, and go to episode 1 and listen to all 200 Jocko podcasts. That's what you should do. and so he wrote the book Extreme Ownership, and he was like, yeah, I just wrote 1,000 words a day. I just write 1,000 words a day. And so that was always my goal. Like, I would either interview somebody every day, or I'd try to write 1,000 words a day. Some days you write more, some days you write less. And some days you get pulled away, like during the football season, I had less time. But like anything else in life, it was consistent effort over time. But the story behind writing it, is I looked at Caledonia, and I know you guys are in La Crescent, and but I looked at, hey, they've won the state championships. They've produced 2 Navy SEALs in the last 20 years. They've produced 2 NFL football players and countless other guys that are out there just getting after life, right? And ways that are more below the radar than Navy SEALs and NFL football players.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, as much or more successful. I'm like, I need to write a book about this. And my wife is like, finally, I said it so many times. She's like, you just need to be quiet about this and write it. And so I attribute it to her. She just said, that's how I like my wife to talk to me. Just shoot it straight. It doesn't work in reciprocation. Like, she doesn't enjoy it when I say that. I've learned that the hard way. So then it was just the discipline over time. And somebody's out there is thinking, man, I got a story in me that I could put on paper. Just start. I was looking at my journal today. I had parts of this book in my journal like 8 years ago. And, it was just always there. So you just have to put pen to paper or start typing is the proper term now.
Yeah. Well, it's a phenomenal read, and I would encourage everyone to do it. And it's interesting how much because there's a lot of people that watch this from afar. We got kids in Texas, Colorado, California, Wisconsin, lots of places. So it's not just here locally. Although I think those who have participated and watched these, been a part of the curriculum, understand kind of the dynamics of this town.
Yeah.
And the rivalry that exists with Caledonia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, a rivalry that's been diminished because of being stomped on for so many years. But there's a respect there, like a respect there for what that town has done and the people that it's produced. And your book is just great at really digging in and explaining all of that, where, you could be the most bitter rival in the world, but if you were to read that and understand, you got to respect your enemy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
100%.
So I've learned so much from you and from your mentor, Carl, and we'd be foolish to not use that.
Yep.
Foolish.
Yeah. And
Everyone else should be foolish. Sorry.
I envy what they have up there, and I had a problem today, and I called Carl, and he helped me through it. He gave me some advice, told me what he would do, and I'm like, you know what? That's what I'm gonna do, because this guy is wise beyond anything I can comprehend, So,
Yeah.
but like he said, respect your enemy, and I'm gonna use that guy to kind of help build up things around here.
Well, and this guy
as much as and you now.
Put Esch to work.
Yeah, right. I might have to.
Anytime.
Careful.
It's think of the legacy that man's going to leave, guys. I mean, it's unbelievable. And how many lives he's going to affect when it's all said and done. like, I think he's going to try to coach his grandkids, right?
Yeah, Duke.
It goes back to the whole faith thing, storing up treasures in heaven, like those are the things that really matter. It's not, Carl isn't making millions and millions of dollars and California doing what he's doing. But when it comes to Judgment Day,
Yeah.
he's probably going to hear those words. Good job,
Yeah.
faithful servant.
Yep.
The
Yeah,
dude-
it sounds like he's doing a lot of the same things. So that's,
Yes.
Minnetonka and
Yes.
Mankato West is
Yeah.
unbelievably lucky to have a person.
And
like
I've
that.
met some of his players, Mark's players, and they speak the same way about Mark. So
Well, the difference between me and Carl is I'm always going to have air conditioning in my house.
Oh no!
he doesn't have AC?
Oh, he literally
Oh,
doesn't have AC, man.
what a psycho. I'm sitting here sweating right now. Jeez.
Oh my God! Now that's insane.
So we were having, we went out with Carl and Becky a while back, a few months ago, and Sarah's like, Carl, Becky, can you give us some advice for how to raise our girls, live our, Carl's, he's like, I gotta stop for a second here. He goes, become more Amish. Is that your advice? And the boy was like, he's got a flip phone, and I mean, the screen's killing us, right? And I got this iPhone right here, and I find myself looking at it way too much.
Yep.
I do think, the book is a great read for kids too. I tried to do it so, I've had players that have read it in a Minnetonka program, and now they know my heart, right? And so I built a relationship with them through just them reading my book. So if you're a kid out there, man, I would read and apply.
Absolutely.
Yep. Great.
Well, Mark, I got one more question and we'll wrap this thing up.
All right.
So you've been in the trenches working with kids for 20 years, you said, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in working with, because largely this will be kids from 7 through 19 that will watch this. What are some of the biggest hurdles that you see that kids need to overcome during those formative years of their lives to just become who they want to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. So here's what I tell all my students and my players. You have a purpose in life, and you might not know what that purpose is right now. You might not know what that purpose is until you're 40 years old or 50 years old. You just always have to move forward believing that you have a very specific purpose in this life. There's something that you can give that nobody else can give. And you know what? Don't worry about what your middle school friends say about you, or maybe they're not your friends, right? If those middle school kids make fun of you, if those high school kids make fun of you, hold a line, go the path that you know is the right path. I remember sitting in 7th grade study hall, and a bunch of guys in Caledonia thought that my older brother, who was a senior, narked out a party, and they were just ribbing him and just giving him a hard time, threatening to beat him up. And then it came down to me too. I was sitting in a study hall, and I remember just tearing up by myself, kind of hiding so nobody could see me. And that just intensified, like, I'm not going to cave into that type of behavior. So if you're a middle schooler, you're a high schooler, you know what the right thing to do is. And it's not the easiest thing to do, but you need to do what you know is right and have faith that you have a purpose. You have something to give to the world that is unique, that nobody else is going to give except for you. And you need to move forward in that purpose and with that confidence. And then above all, test the faith. We're talking about Christian faith here. I'm not going to preach to you until you have to believe something. It has to be your choice, but investigate it. Think about it when you go to bed. Think about it when you wake up in the morning or when you're watching a sunset. Think about how you got here and investigate it and make your own decision. And I think those are all the most important things you can do as a young person.
Solid.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff. This
Solid.
is another unbelievable.
We know some good people.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, holy smokes, we know some good people. These have been awesome, not only for the kids, but
Yeah.
like I'm loving this. You know, I love the wisdom. I love meeting new people and hearing their story. And this is awesome. So I just want to say thank you for coming on and sharing, you know, your story and sharing your experiences with us. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, guys. I think it's awesome that you're doing this. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to be on it to start with, and just keep doing it. Keep doing it, and this is going to change lives.
Well, Mark, love you, buddy. Thanks for spending time with us, man.
Guys, love you.
See you
Take
soon.
care. All right.
See you later. Thank you. Great to meet you.
Meeting you.